Good afternoon, members of the media, members of the national viewing and listening public. Thank you very much for meeting with us once again. Today we will continue our conversation with you, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, as we continue to monitor our way through the challenges that we are facing. I have in the same format with me today the Minister of Health and his senior staff. I have the Minister of Social Development, who will tell us a little bit about our plans and expectations for family services and support services. We have the Minister of National Security, who will also join us at the appropriate time. Last time I spoke to you, I did indicate to you that the Minister of Trade had led a team to Tobago to represent me and the Ministry of Trade with our colleagues in Tobago and the business sector there. She will give us a report on that today. And we also have, once again, welcome Dr. Roshan Parashram, who will support his minister in bringing us up to date on what is happening with our preparations. And coming through the door is the Minister of Finance, who will spend most of his time today telling us about the specifics of what we have been working on and what we are able to do and announce today. So we have a very interesting day in front of us. I want to begin once again by thanking our support team, our national support team in the Ministry of Health. Our doctors, our nurses, our technicians, our maintenance officers, all those people in the Ministry of Health and its appendages, wherever they might be, and our suppliers from the private sector, to ensure ensuring that the most important thing in Trinidad and Tobago, the most important objective is being met. And let me remind you what that objective is. That objective is that when we find ourselves with infected citizens and citizens who need to be hospitalized or to be cared for in any way, that we have the wherewithal to respond to them. That is the objective. And so far, so good. Our healthcare system is still intact. We are not being overwhelmed at this stage, and we are responding to what has come our way. Because you see, it is when the system is unable to cope with what is demanded that the problem becomes beyond our reach. And let me also say to you, we have started from a location where we did not have any person in our national community who had confirmed to be carrying the virus. And of course, you know, some people were anxious to announce the first arrival. It took a few weeks for that to happen. Then we started getting some instances having been brought to us from persons who had come from areas where the virus was available at an earlier time. We got to 9 persons of that situation, and then we got a boatload all at once of persons who had chosen to do otherwise. And the bottom line in that is that a significant number of the beds that we had available to have come to us in a particular pace, we had to make those beds available and to direct staff in a way, but that's a different conversation. The bottom line is that we are able to cope with what has come our way. We expect, given the way this virus has been penetrating populations in the weeks ahead, particularly the next 2 weeks, we expect that the numbers in Trinidad and Tobago will increase. That's a fact. But we also expect that our health infrastructure and our health caregivers would be able to respond. This planning, this expectation could be thrown off, be undermined, become insufficient if something happens that ought not to happen. What is that something? That something is if the population behaves irresponsibly. I can say that so far, the vast majority of people are behaving responsibly, so our chances are reasonably good. But we expect, and it is happening as we expect, that there are some people in our society and some who are outside of our society at this time who may do things which could have the effect of allowing our infection to increase beyond our expectation. That is what we're trying to avoid. I must tell you, without castigating anyone, I was a little disappointed this morning when I saw that picture on the front page of the Express, because it tells me that some people are either unaware or are not in sync with what we are trying to inculcate. Stay away from people, especially if they have come from places where the facts are that there are high levels of infection. So let's use that picture as what we don't do. And it is not directly at any particular person. We are trying to encourage and become accustomed to a certain kind of behavior. If we follow the spatial distancing, the social distancing, that gives us the best chance. And let me go a little further. Dr. Parasam, when he gets to the podium, I want him to touch on what is likely to happen in the end. Because when we eventually open up the system, when we think that we are safe enough, what we are learning to do now would be important. Because these epidemics, when they come, they tend to have a phase 2. And history has shown that that phase 2, if it meets an unprepared population, it could be worse than phase 1. And I'm sure the doctors, the epidemiologists can tell us a bit more about that at the appropriate time. But we are anticipating that the concentration, the level of infection that we are experiencing now, so far I have not been informed that there has been any death from the virus or that we have had any community spread. But we are not immune to that. It's an evolving situation. So let us be prepared and be ready in the event that our turn comes when we have to report community spread. Because we're not testing everybody, but we are aware that it is possible that in our society that there are people who are infected and could be infecting other people. And that is why we are saying, let's assume that that is so. And that's a good assumption to make. That is why we are staying away from each other, even though we are not, at this point, demonstrating or presenting the symptoms that we know. And that is important. That is very important. We have worked very many hours since I saw you last, the Minister of Finance and his team, the private sector, the public sector, and today the Minister of Finance will tell you what has been the government's decisions as to what we are doing. I had said to you on the very first day that the government is taking certain definitive actions. Those actions are meant to respond to the health challenge, but those actions will have a knock-on effect on our economy. And by economy, I mean the people who are engaged in businesses of one kind or another. Those who keep us clean, those who keep us healthy, those who keep us fed. Those actions that we have taken by order have certain effects, and we have worked very hard to see how we can ameliorate those hard times that are going to affect those people who are directly affected by the actions. And I also want to say, I know that whatever we do would not find favor with everybody, but it would find favor with the majority of people. I simply want to say that we would like to do much more for all of us. But insofar as we are aiming to do anything like that, which the Minister of Finance will present later, there's a constraint. And that constraint is how much money is available to bring the kinds of relief that we think we can try to bring to those persons who are affected. And let's understand something here. It is not compensation, because all of us have to be directly involved in receiving the negatives of this situation. What the state is trying to do is to bring as much relief as we can, so that at the end of the day, all of us would be here and all of us will have the opportunity to continue our life in a way that is reasonably close to what we were before. So there's a limit to the amount of funds available, and we have to prioritize, and the Minister of Finance will tell you what those priorities are and how we'll proceed. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to be trying to upset ourselves about what didn't happen and how much didn't get. We have tried reasonably to make the most of what is available. And also understand that this expenditure that we are incurring now and the liabilities that we are incurring by way of guarantees, much of it had not formed part of the national budget. The national budget is still servicing the country as we had planned to before. We still got to pay all the public servants. We still got to pay all the pensions. We still got to pay the public debt. So in other words, this is an additional expenditure which we are forced to make and which we are making and which we will make because it's required. But at the same time, we are keeping body and soul together. And of course, as we do that, let us not be people who had an opportunity to do better. And because of lack of cooperation, greed, or dishonesty, we have squandered our opportunity to come out of this in a better way. I have every confidence that the people of Trinidad and Tobago will do well, will cooperate, and every passing day more and more persons are being encouraged even by their colleagues on their side that this is what we need to do. And it is not only about those persons who are directly affected. I think every one of us can claim to be directly affected. We are affected in different ways. And today we will tell you. Let me just remind you what we set out to do the last time. We set about to provide relief to individuals who would have temporarily lost their jobs during this period. Let me remind you, we do not know how long this period will be. So it makes it very difficult to plan definitively. We are planning in an indicative way, whether it is 2 months, 3 months, and hoping that it ends in that kind of time frame. It is quite likely it may not end in that time frame. It may go longer, and that puts even more pressure on us to determine how much we can put into the system as relief up front, not knowing when the end date is. So when you think about what we would have done today, just bear those points in mind. We set about to ease the burden on companies who were forced to close as a result of the orders that we have given and the actions that we are taking to fend off this bug. And we set about to motivate companies to retain employment of staff, because those who we are asking the business sector, don't use the opportunity to sever staff at this stage. Let's see if you could hold on for a while, and with some support from the government, a little challenge from you in going a bit further, and of course those who are affected. It's not a zero-sum game, but it may not be a 100% game either. We are having to make adjustments at the workplace, at the marketplace, at the Ministry of Finance. And what we've done, what we're seeking to do, is to create the correct macroeconomic environment, and you would have been, the Minister of Finance spoke to that last time, telling you what he has done with the central bank and so on. And of course, today the Minister of Social Development will speak to assistance to individuals, and there are different categories of individuals. The Ministry of Finance will speak to some of those who are actually employed persons who may have been affected, and the Ministry of Social Development will speak about those individuals who may not have been employed but are also affected and are requiring some assistance from the state. And of course, in the business sector, we are making the assumption that the small businesses and the medium-sized businesses are the ones that are most vulnerable to shortages of inputs, of cash. So the first attempt that we'll make to bring that relief, the Minister of Finance will deal with that a bit later on. And of course, with respect to the assistance to individuals, I can tell you there are a number of things that we have done. Let me tell you where we are at this stage. We've worked with the central bank in creating a high liquidity, low interest, a low interest rate macro environment. We've done that. We're working with the banking sector to develop liquidity support, and those packages are for customers. We've done that. We've worked with the banking sector to facilitate reduction in interest on credit cards. That's done. We've worked with the banking sector to facilitate the waiving of penalty interest on overdrafts, And the extension of overdrafts to customers where necessary, that's done. And let me just say, on the very first day when I spoke to you about how we're going to respond to this challenge, I told you we had weaknesses and we had strengths. One of the strengths that we had and we have, and that we've been working with, you would have gathered, is our banking sector. That is one of the strengths in Trinidad and Tobago. We have a banking sector that we could have relied on, that we are relying on, and that is now coming to our assistance in this way. The government of Trinidad and Tobago, Minister of Finance today will talk a bit about VAT, which is a debt owed by the state to the business sector. Instructions are on their way to provide moratoria at TTMF and HDC. And of course, we've been in touch with the credit union. Minister Robert Lee Hunt has been leading that charge with the discussions with the credit union, and the Minister of Finance will speak to that. And increased allocation of foreign exchange, we'll be in a position to do some of that for specific purposes, guaranteeing that we are able to fund our requirement for pharmaceuticals and our food bills and our manufacturers getting their raw materials as and when available. And finally, I did tell you, while we were here at the capital in Port-of-Spain, focusing on building out this architecture of responses, I did ask my colleague, the Minister of Trade and Industry, to lead a team to Tobago to do similar discussions with our colleagues in Tobago at the Tobago House of Assembly, the body with executive authority in our sister isle. And they did that and met with the private sector, had in-depth discussions, and Minister Gopi Skoon will speak to you today about Tobago in this discussion that we've been carrying on here with. So let us start with the Minister of Health giving us his update from the Ministry of Health, and he will call his staff as and when required. Minister of Health, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, Cabinet colleagues, ladies and gentlemen of the media, wider listening and viewing public. I would like to take off again from where the Prime Minister left off, because Prime Minister, I must tell you, healthcare workers are responding positively to your appreciation. And they tell me how they appreciate the thanks that you send out to them, and they pledge their continuing support to Trinidad and Tobago at this point in time. I would have spoken directly to some of them up at the Eastern RHA over the weekend, and these are volunteers who volunteered to go into Balandra. And I thank them again. I thank them on behalf of the Prime Minister, the Cabinet, and the public. Some of that burden now has shifted to NCRHA, where 40 of the patients are now housed at Couva falling under the domain of NCRHA. The Prime Minister spoke about the front page of the Express, behavior which is not in keeping with what we expect. It gives me no pleasure now in talking about two specific instances of behaviors which are not in keeping with good public health. It gives me no pleasure. But I have to mention it because the message is still not getting down to every single person. There's a particular preparatory school in Powder Magazine which sent out a letter to parents stating that they will be open for business from today. We had to shut them down. And that is how you encourage community spread. Could you imagine if that little preschool, if we didn't shut them down today, the whole Western Peninsula could have had community spread. Another example where people are not adhering to quarantine rules, and again, it gives me no pleasure in saying this, the 40 patients at Couva, we had to actually call the army in to talk to them, to behave themselves, to adhere to quarantine rules, and to stop violating the zones that we have put out for them. We had to call in the army to talk to these 40 patients. You are quarantined for a reason. So these are just two examples in addition to what the Prime Minister said about the front page of the Express where people are kissing. So I just leave those two there. On Friday, I would have had Dr. Erica Wheeler of PAHO give you a presentation on how we are going to expand our testing. I will give you some more details because we met over the weekend again. So, CARFA will start testing all samples that fit criteria of potential exposure. and it will not be capped. That is, there will be no limit to Trinidad and Tobago. And you saw this in action last week, where we were able to test 68 people in one fell swoop. So the testing has expanded. We are going to expand it even further by the following. At Eric Williams Medical Sciences Complex, we have a PCR machine. It is going to be validated by CARFA within the next couple of days. And hopefully by the end of the week, that machine at Eric Williams will also be available to supplement what is being done at CARFA. We have an additional PCR machine which was already ordered, luckily. It is in the country, and it is going to be located at the Trinidad Public Health Lab, which is in the same compound with CARFA. That should be up within 2 to 3 weeks. The only bugbear is that we have to fly in a technician from the company. I will apply to the Minister of National Security for an exemption. I have already sourced through a corporate donor a private jet to fly in the person, do the work, and take them back out. So the travel restriction will not apply. And corporate Trinidad and Tobago, I want to thank you for coming on board. So by the end of the week, we will have Eric Williams PCR up to do expanded testing. And hopefully in a couple of weeks at TPHL, we'll have a third machine coming up. We don't know how long this issue is going to last. And in planning for the future, we have a fourth machine coming in from the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA. We are a member of the IAEA. Within 4 to 6 weeks, a fourth machine will be up and running in Trinidad and Tobago. So we are going to be well served by PCR machines and testing. With this testing now at Eric Williams, we'll be able to handle another 180 cases per day, which will be about 1,260 cases per week. Because as we expand testing, as we increase testing under the new protocols as approved by WHO, CARFA alone will not be able to handle it. Because it will be like an assembly line, and you will just get stuck at some point in time. What will be our testing strategy going forward? 1, travelers quarantined with primary contacts, as we do it now, they will be tested. So if you have a positive case in a house, all primary contacts, spouse, children, domestic helpers, if they live with you in the house, they will be tested. The secondary contacts followed up by the county medical officers of health, they will be tested. And any other person that is a high-risk group once you are symptomatic, even though you may not have a travel history. So we are going to be ramping up our testing in a big way very, very soon. Healthcare workers will form a very special cohort of people to be tested and treated in a very special way. We are going to have expanded healthcare worker testing. This will be brought on stream hopefully by the end of the week. In an effort to assist healthcare workers, we have located some accommodation for them. So healthcare workers who are volunteering or who are working with our patients, like in Couva, they will be given special accommodation if they wish to use it so they don't have to go home. Corporate Trinidad and Tobago is already providing free meals to all our frontline people involved in the COVID-19 response. Thank them very much. TSTT has agreed to give those workers, not all healthcare workers, those that we identify, like those in Couva, those in Sangre Grande, those in Matura, free credit on their phones so they could keep in touch with their families. So we are treating our healthcare workers as a special cohort of people, treating them with love, care, and attention. I just want to make one other comment on testing. There are some private labs, and I spoke about this already, that are doing what are called rapid tests. These are not PCR machines, polymerase chain reaction machines. These are rapid tests which are not accurate. There's a lab in East Trinidad, a lab in South Trinidad, lab in central Trinidad. I urge the public not to send your samples to these labs to be tested. The only agency that will give you a true positive or a true negative is those labs with a PCR machine, and the only lab so far is CARFA. We will have Eric Williams up and running soon, and Trinidad Public Health Lab. I want to make special mention now of what is happening with our call center. We launched our call center on Saturday, and as predicted, we were getting a lot of different types of calls. I asked people to only make a call to the call center as a last resort after you go to our website, Instagram, Facebook, where there's a lot of information. What we are getting on the call center, unfortunately, is a lot of people asking us how to change your flights. No, it's not a joke, because you are preventing legitimate calls from coming in. So the call center is not being used for the purpose we envisaged. Please only use 877-WELL, is it? 877-WELL for authentic COVID illness-related questions. And that way we could reach a lot more people who need those questions answered. I just want to give you a little idea now, as Minister of Health, what we are doing to ramp up capacity, bed capacity. At Couva, our total bed capacity is 254. Currently, 46 are occupied. That means we have 208 vacant. At Cora, we have ramped up, total bed capacity 100, occupied 18, vacant 82. We are ramping up the Arima Hospital, 90 beds, 4 intensive care, 6 HDU. Members of the public, I tell you this because I want to take off where the Prime Minister said again. Currently, our healthcare system is performing well. The stress test that we put on it with the 68 cruise members, with the 48 tests, we have been able to cope well. That was a stress test that told us so far, so good. However, with reckless behavior, like that school in Powder Magazine, like that place in Shogunas over the weekend, that could bring this whole thing crashing down in an instant. I am pleading with the public to listen to the Honorable Prime Minister, myself, Minister Young, Chief Medical Officer, on social distancing. Don't congregate in tens or more. If you are ill, don't go to work, don't send your child, but schools are closed. But the private schools and the private institutions feel that there's a different rule for them. It's one rule for everybody, private or public sector. Where we are now is a hard-won victory where the health system is performing well. Let us not squander this as we have seen in other countries. I implore everybody to listen to the exhortations of the Honorable Prime Minister. Let us all behave in a responsible manner, and as I keep on saying, we will get through this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Could we have Dr. Parasam to give us the inside story about within the walls?
Hi, good afternoon, Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Ministers. So basically, I will start as usual with the daily update. So far we have tested 311 cases, 51 in total. So let me disaggregate a little bit. 41 from the cruise ship, and I think it needs some explanation. 10 other persons who would have traveled in the recent past. So you would have noted maybe 3 or 4 days ago, we only had 150 people being tested. So we doubled that in about 3 to 4 days. So our testing has scaled up significantly. It is good that we actually were only able to pick up out of those 150, with the 40 aside, 2 additional people, which gives me a bit of hope. And we're in a good place so far. The 41 out of the 40, we would have said 40 persons would have come out of the 68 that was actually at Balandra. Out of the first 9, there was one individual who returned on a flight prior from the vessel, would have come to Trinidad and Tobago directly from Port Health with an ambulance, would have gone straight to Cora. There were 2 people actually. That person was positive. There's another person that came with her who was negative. So just to clear up where we got the 41 from as we changed from yesterday's. So there are actually 41 people that would have come from that cruise ship as positive. In total, yesterday we would have picked up an additional 3 persons in the airport, and they would have been taken to Cora straight away as well. So it would have brought the total number of people coming from the cruise ship to 73, which is the actual number we got in the first instance. So we would have been notified there were 2 people coming before the 68. The 68 persons came as a group, and then 3 persons came on their own yesterday and were put in Cora as well. So they will be tested as symptoms arise. So basically that's the update. I think questions can come later. In terms of the clinical status of the patients, out of the total number of 51 persons that we have, the number of patients at Cuba are 47. ICU ventilated, there's 1 patient in ICU who is stable, has been stable for a number of days now. There's 5 persons in the HDU, which is a high dependency unit, meaning that they require a little additional support than a regular ward. They would need oxygen and the like. They are not ventilated at this point in time. So they're not as critical as ICU. And there are 41 ambulatory patients, meaning that they are walking around with mild symptoms. There's no severe symptoms in that group. So that's my clinical update for now. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Parasam. Thank you very much, Dr. Parasam, once again for keeping us informed. I would like to ask the Minister of National Security to take the podium at this time.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Good afternoon, members of the media, cabinet colleagues, wider viewing and listening public of Trinidad and Tobago. I'd like to start by just briefly taking the opportunity to thank some of the frontline people outside of health who have also been playing a very important role in the past couple of weeks. That's immigration workers or port health workers, customs, the airport authority staff, or police service or defense force, the fire services, and even those who have done some significant work at the prisons within the past week or so. I'd like to start by also say, well, that's not start. I'd like to also say that a decision was taken in discussion last night with respect to our air bridge and the travel between Trinidad and Tobago. One of the things that we're asking people from now on until further notice, only engage in essential travel between Trinidad and Tobago. This decision and this suggestion, strong suggestion, is to again try and reduce the number of contact and the potential for contact spread between Trinidad and Tobago on the aircraft. The services are going to continue flying. We've been in discussions with CAL. They are going to make the announcements as to the amount of persons they will carry on a plane load and the amount of service. But at this stage, the government is asking that only essential travel be conducted via the air bridge. The ferry service is continuing, and the ferry service has a lot more capacity on a daily basis. We're asking persons, if you need to travel to Tobago or from Tobago to Trinidad, kindly consider the use of the ferry service. But even in the circumstances, essential travel. None of this, of course, is going to affect the flow of goods between Trinidad and Tobago, which we will continue. I also use the opportunity to announce that after discussion with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, they're converting one of their hotlines, the 555 line, and they're also going to set up other modules for persons who have concerns, because we've been getting a lot of calls, we've been getting a lot of persons messaging us about bars that may be continuing to remain open, persons who may be continuing to congregate above the suggested number of 10, and these types of instances that you can provide this information to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and they will dispatch persons as necessary. But again, to pick up where both the Prime Minister and the Minister of Health have said previously, we ask persons to please continue conducting personal social responsibility, having the social distancing. On that point, I'd just like to touch very briefly on the latest public health ordinance regulation that was published over the weekend on the 22nd of March. And just to give some guidance, because there still seems to be quite a bit of uncertainty, via this regulation, what we've done is we have made it an offense during the period specified, which is until the 30th of April in certain instances, for the conduct of bars, the business of bars. We're asking bars to stay closed. We're still getting reports of bars remaining open and persons congregating. The police service are providing the necessary law enforcement with respect to this. But again, let us not have our police service being distracted with closing bars and asking people not to congregate in bars. Bars are to remain closed. The same thing for clubs. The same thing for cinemas. Cinemas, by and large, all of the cinemas remain closed from day one, even before this regulation. Another one we added over the weekend are common gaming houses or betting offices, off licenses, as we call them. We were told that persons continue to congregate there. We have taken a decision to shut these down for the same period of time. The religious we added over the weekend. Unfortunately, we were forced to add religious services and other religious gatherings where the number of persons participating exceeds 10. This was made necessary by some of the irresponsible behavior of persons still congregating, persons asking for their worshippers to still congregate. So now we have the force of the law, but we're still asking persons to abide by it and not let us have to send our law enforcement orders to ensure that this is complied with. And then, of course, the in-house dining at restaurants, we've also shut that down. What we've done is we have also, as you know, we announced on Saturday and it kicked in at midnight last night, we have closed our borders. Of course, this does not include air and sea cargo and air and sea transport between Trinidad and Tobago. Members of the public and persons looking on, when we say we've closed our borders, we have closed our borders. I continue to get a number of requests from persons who are outside asking for exemptions, all sorts of requests. At this stage, our borders remain closed. The Minister of National Security has the authority to grant exemptions, but it will only be exercised in the most crucial of circumstances, flying in samples for testing, medical personnel, and other exemptions on a case-by-case basis. Persons who have found themselves outside of Trinidad and Tobago at this unfortunate time, you are seeing what is taking place globally. Globally, airports are closing down, ports are closing down, countries are taking decisions to close their borders. The safest thing for you at this stage is to stay put. The most risky places for the contamination by the COVID virus are international airports, cruises, and resorts, according to the medical experts. We have closed our borders. So making these requests to us from all different quarters and all different modes, asking for an exemption is not going to work at this stage. We are being very, very strict for the protection of the people who are here in Trinidad and Tobago, and there will be no exemptions. I continue to get requests from persons who are outside, flying into other jurisdictions, other nearby countries, and then asking if they can be permitted to enter Trinidad and Tobago. The answer is no. And when you make these trips, you're now putting those countries at risk as well. So we're asking persons wherever you are, just stay put at this stage. That is the government's decision. With respect to, there seems to be some lack of clarity or understanding and interpretation of the public health regulations that I just referred to. So, for example, today we had about 12 teachers, I believe, not congregating, but meeting at the Cipriani Labour College, and then the police were called in. Again, this is not a proper use of police resources. If people are in gatherings that are not social gatherings and they're conducting their work exactly as we're doing in this room right now, there are more than 10 people in this room, conduct social distancing. People are asking still about the groceries and the pharmacies. Again, it depends on the size of the groceries and the pharmacies. After discussion with the chief medical officer, he spoke to the public health officers and inspectors, and they have spoken to the various groceries, pharmacies, how to sanitize. And it does not mean you cannot have more than 10 people in a setting. Once there's that social distancing, what we are saying is no more than 10 people in social gatherings, people getting together to drink, to lime, but it does not mean that offices who are performing essential services or groceries, persons who are meeting in their workplace, cannot have more than 10 people once there is sufficient personal social distancing taking place. So please apply the common sense. You understand what we're suggesting to keep a sufficient distance to stop the spread of the virus and the potential spread of the virus. At this stage, the maxim is one exemption to the opening of the borders will lead potentially to others, and we're not allowing exemptions at this stage. Unfortunately, that is what it has come to. But this decision is being taken to protect those of us who are here in Trinidad and Tobago, and also against the global spread of the virus, as you see is happening internationally. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Young. At this point, I would like to ask Minister Gopi Skoon to give us a report from the Tobago end.
Honorable Prime Minister, colleague ministers, members of the listening and viewing audience, members of the media, good afternoon. It was my honor last week to represent the Honorable Prime Minister and, of course, the ministry which I serve, the Ministry of Trade and Industry, along with my colleague ministers, Minister West, Minister of Public Administration, and Minister in the Ministry of Finance, and also Minister of Tourism, Minister Randall Mitchell. We held two meetings, the first being with the Chief Secretary and several of the other secretaries with responsibility for health, tourism, and finance, and also members of their executive team. The second meeting would have been a fulsome stakeholder meeting, and we would have met with several members of the Tobago arm of the Chamber of Commerce, the Tobago Hoteliers Association, the Tobago Agro-Processing Association, the Tobago Agriculture Association, the Crown Point Business Association, the Tobago Bridal Association. They too are affected, the Bed and Breakfast Association. So a wide cross-section of persons, perhaps about 30 to 40 persons. And then after that, we would have held a press conference. The focus of the discussion really was on food security for the island, employment sustainability, and business sustainability as well. At that time, there were several measures rolled out by the government already to which most persons would have been exposed, including our macroeconomic policy and also our individual social support measures and also our business support measures. So we would have had discussions in particular with all of the stakeholders to ensure that they understood exactly what the government was speaking about. And in addition, we would have also exchanged, had some exchanges on CAL and also on the port to ensure that there was certainty in terms of goods coming to the island. With regard to food security, the assurances were given that Tobago, there's no food shortage in Tobago, that there's a full supply of food at all supermarkets, including the very big ones like Viewport and also Penny Savers. And I can tell you, again, that the Trinidad Chamber is taking a special look at Tobago to ensure that the large distributors like Massey and also the Answer Macal Group, also the Tobago distributors like Morsehead and Almonders and so on, that they are all fully stocked. I mean, there might have been one item which would have been looking as if it's going to be in short supply, and I can tell you that they've already made arrangements to ensure that there are shipments of those. So generally, discussions ensued on those. In particular, with regard to the Tobago businesses, at that time, the Honourable Prime Minister had already announced that there would be a grant facility for the room upgrade program. And that was in mind to take advantage of the period of time when hotels would not be occupied. So the purpose of that is really to have enhanced room upgrades, and we are looking at the enhancement of some 3,800 rooms, and that is across the board in hotels, guest houses, bread and breakfast facilities as well. So that was already announced, and I'm going to leave it to the Minister of Finance to announce the volume. Existing also within the THA is an Enhanced Enterprise Association Assistance Fund, and also an Enhanced Enterprise Assistance Grant Facility. That exists, and it is to help small and micro entrepreneurs, and those are for persons outside of the tourism industry, but included in some of them as well. So I'm talking about persons involved in manufacturing, all of whom will be hard hit because of the knock-on effect. That grant facility exists, and again, we had said to them then that, and they were quite interested in government enhancing those two facilities, the grant facility and the loan support facility, the loan support facility being for a loan of $250,000, and the grant facility being for $25,000. We also asked at that time, we listened to them, and we were told that that particular one for the grant fund facility, which was primarily for the purchase of machinery and equipment, that can be extended by an executive decision to also working capital. So that's another area of support for working capital support for those outside of the tourism, tourism's direct sector, but also including some of them as well. At that time, we would have already also announced all of the assistance which businesses are getting via the commercial banks and so on. And there will be other support measures to be announced by the Minister of Finance with regard to both the businesses and also to persons. It is to remember also that there are existing facilities for Tobago hoteliers and other persons involved in the tourism industry as well, including the government loan guarantee facility, which remains available to persons in the industry, and also the tourism upgrade program, which also exists. So what I'm saying is that there are several measures to assist small and medium-sized businesses in Tobago to ensure that there is some kind of business continuity and preparation more than ever for when we return to a normal. And it is expected, I mean, what one has to keep in mind is that our room stock must always be of an international standard. It has to be competitive. Yes, we are seeing some improvement in terms of the arrivals, but if it is going to make a difference economically, it means that our stock has to be up to standard. And this is a time to take advantage through the new facility announced by Honorable Prime Minister and also the existing facilities which are there. And so, again, we emphasize on the business side, as far as is possible, that businesses continue to use best effort to keep their persons employed for at least 4 weeks. There are other measures to be announced today, in addition to the social support measures already announced by the Minister of Social Development, will take care on the other side. So that's where we are. Certainty in terms of the survival of business, certainty in terms of food security, certainty in terms of employment sustainability as well. I think that's it. Thank you, Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Minister of Trade and Industry, and assisting me with my responsibility as Minister responsible for Tobago. As you know, that as Prime Minister, the Tobago House of Assembly is directly connected, I should say, that's a safe enough word, to the Office of the Prime Minister. And you may not know this as well, that the Office of the Prime Minister is responsible for the TRHA. So these are areas of not overlapping, but closely associated responsibilities. And I want to thank Minister Gopi Skoon and her team for carrying out that assignment in Tobago. I hope to get to Tobago sometime in the not too distant future. As soon as the first opportunity arises, I would be there and would continue this line of contact with our Tobago colleagues. At this time is a good time to introduce our newest member of our team, who will be with you on a regular basis going forward. We have here this morning Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance, Senior Public Servant, Mr. Vishnu Danpal, who is here to make sure that the Minister of Finance does not go off track. Minister of Finance, you have the podium. As usual.
I thought you would be next. Okay. Sorry, Prime Minister.
So I see.
I was waiting on the lovely Minister of Social Development to speak. So, good afternoon, everyone.
No, sir.
I wanted to recap some of the things that we have done already. The Prime Minister has referred to them, but I think it's necessary to repeat, to put everything in context, because since last week we've done quite a lot. So just let me start with the first thing. We had discussions with the central bank. I asked the central bank to convene a meeting of its monetary policy committee very quickly, which they did in a couple hours. And very quickly, they reduced the repo rate from 5% to 3.5% and reduced the reserve requirements where the banks have to have cash in the central bank, which earns no interest, from 17% to 14%. By reducing the reserve requirement, that increased the liquidity in the system. And we needed that liquidity for all sorts of things, for soft loan programs, for VAT bonds and so on. The liquidity is required in the system. This released $2.6 billion in cash and resulted in a reduction in the prime lending rate by different amounts in different banks. They all were not at 9.25%. Some of them were a little above. And it has resulted in a reduction in the prime lending rate by commercial banks by around 2%. Most of them are now at 7.5%, or around that figure, down from 9.25, 9.5. So that's a significant reduction in the prime lending rate, which should ease up quite a few businesses at this time. We also work with the banks, I need to repeat, to ask them to defer or skip a payment on loans. Most banks, we started off talking about on a monthly basis, but I must say the banks have stepped up to the plate, and within a matter of days, most banks started to publish advertisements in the papers indicating that they have instituted deferral payment periods for as much as 6 months. Some are 3 months, some are up to 6 months, and I think the lowest is now 3 months. They have also agreed to waive penalty interest on overdraft facilities and to extend overdraft facilities on a case-by-case basis where required. They also reduced the interest rate on credit cards, and they are looking at other arrangements they can make with credit card users. Today, I spoke to the chairman of the TTMF and the Home Mortgage Bank before coming here, and they are proposing to put in place payment deferrals for TTMF and HMB customers, which is mortgages, for up to 3 months in the first instance, and depending on how this thing goes, they may take it up to 6 months. So they're following quite closely what the commercial banks are doing. I also spoke to the chairman of the Housing Development Corporation before I came here. And in the first instance, the board of the Housing Development Corporation is looking at payment deferrals on mortgages and rental payments for HDC customers for 2 months in the first instance, the month of March, the month of April. And then as the situation evolves, they will see whether they need to extend it. I must stress, these are for people who need it in both cases, TTMF, HMB. I encourage anybody who has the wherewithal to be current with their loan payments to pay. If you can pay, I suggest that you pay. These arrangements are for people who ask for it and people who need it. But of course, it is not limited to needy people. With respect to assistance to small and medium-sized businesses. We've asked, on the flip side, we've asked the Chamber of Commerce and the TTMF, the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association, and we are also in communication. There's a association or confederation of smaller chambers. We're asking them to ask their members to keep people in jobs for the next 4 weeks. Well, it would now be 3 weeks from last week. And we're hopeful that they will rise to the occasion and they will work with the government to see that they can keep everybody in jobs as far as is practicable. You would have heard the Minister of Trade speak about a grant facility to allow Tobago hoteliers to upgrade their hotel rooms. That grant facility will be funded by the government in the first instance in the sum of $50 million. There's another facility that the THA administers. It's an enterprise development facility, I believe, has a small allocation in this year's budget, and we have agreed to supplement that up to $5 million. I think it just has about a $1 million allocation, whereby the THA would give grants up to $25,000 to people involved in the tourism sector. So that's the quantification of the assistance we're giving at that level. The Minister of Trade and other members of the government have also been in touch with money lenders, Unicoma, Courts and Standards. And while we have not arrived at definite arrangements yet, they too, the money lenders, have agreed in the spirit of collaboration with everyone to provide deferred payments to their members and also an interest rate reduction. I can't give you details yet because that is a work in progress, but the Minister of Trade is in contact with the money lenders. We're also injecting a sum of $100 million to be administered by the credit union movement to support their members. This program, this $100 million in loan financing that's coming from the government, will allow credit union members to access funds on favorable interest terms. So in this period of difficulty, if a credit union member, and the credit union movement, as far as I know, has over 100,000 persons associated with it, if a credit union member finds himself or herself in difficulty, that person will be able to go to their credit union, their respective credit union, and avail themselves of this liquidity support loan program, which will be at a very favorable interest rate. And what we expect the credit unions to do, again, this is a work in progress that is being finalized, that they would advance the loans to the members and then come to the government in regular intervals, perhaps at the end of every month, for reimbursement from the government. So this is direct cash the government is putting into the credit union system to support its members. And these particular loans not only would be at a very favorable interest rate, but person would have quite a period of time to pay off these special loans once the situation normalizes, perhaps over an 18-month period. And this is particularly geared towards credit union members who would have lost their jobs or would have suffered a reduction in income, perhaps being asked to work 3 days a week instead of 5. We had spoken before about accelerating the payment of arrears of VAT owed to businesses. And I think it's necessary for me to put some information into the public domain. There's a lot of information about VAT that people are just not aware of, so it leads to a lot of speculation. VAT arrears are calculated on a daily basis. The Inland Revenue Division does a tally of every single VAT refund owed to every single VAT registered business every day. I asked the Inland Revenue Division this morning to give me today's figures, and these are today's figures. There are, at this time, 10,160 VAT registered companies in Trinidad and Tobago. The total VAT refunds owed at this time, and this would be subject to minor adjustment based on audit before actual payments are made, but the audit is done very quickly, is billion $225 million. So the total of VAT refunds owed as I speak today, $6,225,617,665. Those are the figures in the Gen Tax system. You see, the Inland Revenue Division is totally computerized. They're using an international computer program called Gen Tax. So every day, they can tell you exactly what's going on with everybody. Now, if you break it down, what I was told today, that in terms of persons who are owed $100,000 in VAT refunds or less, the total amount is 4,213 persons, and the total owed to them is $144,616,000. There are also some persons who are now below the threshold of VAT. We need to tidy that up. There are quite a large number of persons there, 4,396, but they're all owed an average of about $3,000. Because we have consistently increased the threshold for VAT as time went by, and that has created this situation. So there's a large body of people where they owed a small amount of money. That totals 13 million. For persons who are owed between $100,000 and $250,000 in VAT refunds, there are 755 of those, and they are owed a total of $119,147,915. For persons owed between $250,000 and $500,000 in VAT refunds, there are 305 of those persons, and they are owed a total of $107,436,954. You may be surprised to learn that when you get up into the higher levels, when you get up to persons who are owed $10 million and more, there are only 72 of them, and that accounts for $5,024,469,000. Let me repeat that. Of the 10,160 VAT-registered companies who were entitled to refunds, there are only 72 who are owed more than $10 million, and the amount owed to them, which is large oil companies like BP and so on, is $5,024,469,000. Let me also speak about income tax refunds, which are mainly owed to self-employed individuals. There are a total of 12,543 refunds, income tax refunds as distinct from VAT, owed to individuals mainly self-employed. The total outstanding owed is $233,996,000. But when you look at the persons who are owed $20,000 or less in a income tax refund, that totals 9,397 people. That means that 75% of people who are owed income tax refunds are owed $20,000 or less. And then in terms of the people who are owed, say, up to $250,000 in VAT refunds, that figure, VAT, no, I'm going to VAT now. In terms of income tax refunds, 75% of the person who are owed income tax refunds are owed $20,000 or less. When you go to VAT refunds, 90% of persons are owed $250,000 or less. Okay? 90%. So I thought it's necessary to put those figures into the system. And because we have done this analysis, and we've established that 75% of the persons who are owed income tax returns are owed $20,000 or less, and 90% of persons who are owed VAT refunds are $250,000 or less, what have we decided to do at the Ministry of Finance? We have some funds available to us in the month of March. And in order to bring relief to businesses, because cash flow is the lifeblood of a business. Without cash flow, businesses cannot continue to employ its workers. So what we've decided to do is that we are going to pay all of the people who are owed income tax refunds of $20,000 or less immediately. That would be 110 $1,184,000. You owe that tax refund? And we are going to pay, I can say immediately today that if you take the 119,000 for persons between 100 and 250,000 in VAT, and the 144 million for persons at 100,000 or less, and the others, I can say immediately today that we can pay everyone who is owed up to $250,000 in VAT. That will cost us about $280 million, and we'll see as cash flow comes in for the month of March, because this is the quarter where we get corporation tax, whether we can also pay everybody up to $500,000, which would be a further $107 million. But I can tell you that we are going to do this, and I can say this without any fear of contradiction, that next week we will pay everybody who has a tax refund due to them of $20,000 or less. That's 9,397 persons, and everybody who has a VAT refund owed of $250,000 or less, and we'll see if we can get up to the 500 next week in cash, so that the issue of bonds will be dealt with in due course. I have charged the public servants in the Ministry of Finance to start paying the VAT bonds on the 31st of March, Mr. Dan Paul. So we all have a lot of work to do, but I am happy to say that the Inland Revenue Department has the name, identity of every single one of these 10,160 persons, and also the amounts owed to them, and so on. And as I speak, I actually went out of the room to have a little chat with the Attorney General. He's working on some amendments for me. As I speak, we have everything, we're putting everything in place to start paying VAT bonds as well next month. And we intend to, as time goes by, pay out $3 billion in VAT bonds. So we're dealing first with the small people, small and medium enterprises in terms of their refunds, small individuals, small people in terms of income tax refunds, and small and medium-sized enterprises in terms of their VAT refunds. And then we'll get to the larger people who have more capacity at this point in time to hold strain for a little while. The most important measure, however, that the team has decided is necessary is a salary relief grant. Because we recognize that because of the measures that have been taken and because of the issues associated with this pandemic, that there will be persons who will be unemployed. And what we have chosen to do, we have decided that individuals who have been temporarily unemployed, temporarily displaced as a result of the prevailing situation, will be eligible to a grant of up to $1,500 per month for a 3-month period. We decided in the first instance that this will be administered through the National Insurance Board. The reason why we're using the National Insurance Board is that they have a database on all persons within the PAYE system, which is hundreds of thousands of persons. So since NIB has all the data on all these people already, where they work and so on, who they are, identification documents with respect to these people, we felt the best thing to do is to use the NIB. We will give them the funds, the government, and each unemployed individual who is temporarily displaced as a result of the measures, and these are in the sectors in the first instance that would be affected. These are the beverage sector, the food sector, the entertainment sector, the hospitality sector, and so on. The list is not exhaustive, but you would be aware there will be persons directly affected. They will have access to a grant of up to $1,500. We're going to work out the details and the qualification criteria in due course over the next 7 days or so. This is going to cost the government, we estimate, over the next 3 months, $400 million. But we thought it was necessary. We recognize that people will be going through hardship in this period, and we thought as a government we had to do this. In terms of where we're getting the money from, I expect Mr. Dan Paul to come to the podium in due course and talk about that. but we're also looking at all possible sources of funding. But you're not here for your good looks, Mr. Dadport.
That is called passing the buck.
You're not here for your good looks. But let me just explain to Trinidad and Tobago citizens. The government has 4 sources of money available to it. 4. In this particular pandemic situation, we have the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. We also have assistance that has been offered by multilateral financial institutions, and I'll name them. The Andean Development Bank, its acronym is CAF, the Inter-American Development Bank, the IDB, the World Bank, and also the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. They all come in different ways, in different forms, in different amounts, with different conditions. I'm very happy to say that the Andean Development Bank so far has offered us substantial sums of money with very few conditions. Some of the other institutions, as is their norm, may attach conditions to whatever assistance they may be willing to offer Trinidad and Tobago. That's the second source of funding. The third source of funding is loan financing on the international market from large entities like Morgan Stanley, Credit Suisse, Bank of America, JP Morgan, etc. Deutsche Bank. We had raised $1 billion using Deutsche Bank the other day. And the fourth source is both foreign currency, US dollars, because there are large deposits of US dollars in the local banking system. Over $3 billion US dollars resides in the local banking system. A lot of it, of course, is tied to certain things, but there is quite a bit of US dollars available in the local banking system and Trinidad and Tobago dollars, of course. So that we're going to use a mix of approaches. We're going to tap into all these sources to fund this program. In terms of the overall cost of everything, right now, the way the price of oil has collapsed and the price of natural gas has collapsed, and also because of reduction in business activity that must occur because of the measures being taken in terms of social distancing and all that sort of thing, we estimate that we may have to have budgetary financing to deal with our original 2020 budget of somewhere between $6 and $7 billion. That's our estimate. The VAT bonds are $3 billion, but that is not a direct charge on us at this point in time. That is that those bonds will mature in several years from now, so we don't have to find cash for that immediately. These programs I've just announced, we will have to find cash for them immediately in terms of paying VAT refunds for small and medium-sized enterprises, in terms of income tax returns, in terms of salary relief grant, in terms of the loan program through the credit unions, in terms of the hotelier support in Tobago and so on. We will have to find cash for that immediately. And then, of course, there are a number of social programs which we will have to find cash for immediately. And I estimate the cost of what I have announced to be in the region of maybe $1 billion, including whatever social development will be called upon to do. And then we also are accelerating trade payables that are owed to contractors and suppliers and so on, and small businesses that do work for the government. That's another $1 billion. So we're looking at plugging a hole in our revenue situation of $6 to $7 billion, and we're looking at immediately another $2 billion in cash to deal with these support measures. And then the $3 billion in bonds is not a cash situation. So that's a broad overview of what we are doing in the Ministry of Finance, and things will evolve as we go along. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister of Finance. I think the Minister of National Security has a point he wants to make on immigration. You can do that now. So.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I forgot earlier to address a particular set of circumstances dealing with immigration. Over the past few days since we announced the various social measures, there's still persons rushing to the immigration office to renew passports and to conduct other business with immigration. So I've spoken to the immigration authorities and the permanent secretaries at the Ministry of National Security, and we will be announcing some additional measures to those that I'm about to announce to alleviate this, because obviously we don't want people congregating and lining up in lines. So the first thing is with respect to permanent residence and citizenship. all permanent residence and citizenship interviews will be suspended until further notice. Applicants will be contacted with new dates of appointment. So those who are in line for permanent residency and citizenship, do not worry. Right now, we're just suspending all interviews, and you will be contacted with future dates. So that will eliminate a category of persons. Persons who have extension of stay applications, so persons who are unable to leave Trinidad and Tobago by the 22nd of March and whose landing certificates may have expired during the period and whose certificates will expire by the 30th of April, you will be granted an extension and are hereby granted an extension until the 22nd of June 2020. So persons who came in that may not be able to leave now, and you had a stamp in your passport saying a particular date, we're granting an extension in the first instance until the 22nd of June. And I will provide the information to the Ministry of Communication to put up, because there's certain email addresses here for you to reach out to, and to provide a copy of the biodata page of your passport. Persons with student permits, of course, we have suspended educational institutions and they're closed until the 30th of April. No student will be affected by this, and any expiry of a student permit for the next 3 months. So if your student permit expires, we're granting a 3-month extension in the first instance. Don't worry about that. Visas, we're not issuing visas to foreign nationals until our borders are reopened. With respect to passports, we are in the process of asking them to look at implementing a drop-off system. We're going to be rescheduling the passport appointments. The Honorable Prime Minister made some suggestions that we're looking at in terms of implementing an alphabetical system. According to your name, we'll deal with you on different days. These things are being dealt with. Right now, what I'm asking is that persons who don't absolutely have to go to the immigration office, especially in light of these announcements that I've just made, which will be put up on the Ministry of National Security website, but also Ministry of Communication will help us in the dissemination of this information. Please do not flock to the immigration offices. Right now, you can't travel anywhere, and there is no need for any fear as to missing appointments. At this stage, we will be rescheduling. Thank you, Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Minister of National Security. At this time, I'd like to ask the Minister of Social Development to take the podium in the context of what the Minister of Finance has mentioned, and see if you can clarify and enlighten us as to the assignments given to the Ministry of Social Development.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Thank you very much, Prime Minister. I see that you left the best for last, and I appreciate that. Prime Minister, colleague ministers, members of the executive of the Ministry of Finance, CMO, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for this opportunity to update you on where we are with regard to the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. On Friday, I indicated that all 41 MPs will be given 50 food cards to distribute to families of children who now receive the food through the school feeding program. All MPs have been contacted, and they will come into the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services head office to receive the cards. When the cards are received, each MP has to sign a document indicating that they have received the card. The value of the card is in the order of $510, and each family will get one card. We are asking that the persons who collect the cards from the MPs sign a statutory declaration indicating that they do not now receive a food card, and we're also asking that they do not dispose of the card at the end of this month, because we are going to top up those cards. As we had said, we'd be topping up the other cards. So they will get an additional 2 months as a top-up. So they need to keep the card. The card will be a temporary food card valued at $510 for each month. With regard to the topping up of the cards for persons who are already in the system, that, as I said before, will be done in April, and each person who is already on a food card will get their top-up in April. We said how we'd be topping up those cards. For households up to 3 persons, $150. 4 to 5 persons, $300, and 6 persons or more, $450. What we have done in addition, where there are cases where persons have been retrenched, terminated, or their income is reduced, we are now giving temporary food cards valued at $510 to those persons for a period of 3 months. And as I said, those cards will be fully loaded at the time of receipt. So do not dispose of the card after month 1. With regard to persons who need that income support that the Minister of Finance has been talking about and the food support, we will be working in collaboration with the Ministry of Labor to capture the data that is necessary to ensure that we do not have persons who are already getting food support coming to get a second card. So we will be working with the Ministry of Labor to get that data and feed it into the data that we have at the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. With regard to persons who are on public assistance and the disability assistance grant, they will also receive a top-up in the same order of $150, $300, and $450 for their additional income support. With regard to children who receive the disability grant, they will get a top-up of $150. With regard to the public assistance and the disability grant, there's an additional amount of $500 that would be for families of 4 or more persons. A number of people have been asking for further explanation with regard to the rental assistance. The Ministry of Social Development and Family Services will be providing rental assistance of up to $2,500 per month in accordance with the policy that has been established in the ministry. So that will be for an initial period of 3 months. If this continues, then we will continue with that for another 3 months. After that 6-month period, if it continues, the assistance will be reduced to $1,500 for 3 months, and following that, it will be further reduced to $1,000. And that is the policy that is already established in the ministry. So that would be the main things that the ministry will be doing. So we'll be doing rental assistance, we'll be giving food support, we'll be ensuring that our disability, persons who are on disability and who are on public assistance get additional support. Additionally, with regard to the socially displaced persons, the Ministry of Social Development will be working with NGOs to ensure that any additional persons who come to be placed in those, to be housed in either our Center for Socially Displaced Persons or Court Shamrock or additional NGOs that work with the ministry, we'll be giving them additional subsistence to ensure that these persons are fed and can be taken care of. We'll be working also with the TTPS and the Ministry of Health so that we get the persons off the street and into those places of shelter. We'd be very dependent on making sure that the regional corporations assist us with moving these persons off the street. In addition, the Ministry of Social Development will be putting in place a call center because we have found that a number of people are congregating at the social development offices, hoping to get in to get what we are putting in place. But it makes no sense for people to congregate there, so we are putting in place a call center. But in the meantime, if persons call 800-1673, they can get information with regard to how this process will work. Additionally, I want to take the opportunity to thank the banking sector that has put in place priority banking for older persons, for the differently abled, and for those public assistance clients. My information is that in the first hour of banking, it will be open for those persons. Afterwards, some of the banks have said that there will be one dedicated teller who would deal with the persons who fall within this category. And this starts from March 25th and will continue to April 3rd. Our expectation is that this expenditure that is in addition to what we do now will be in the order of just around $100 million. So it is quite a large amount of money, but it has to be done in the circumstances. I also wanted to indicate that the ministry is working with the Ministry of Local Government to ensure that the children who are on this school feeding program, that the counselors are the ones who will be given the cards to distribute to these families. And just like what is happening with the MPs, each person who collects a card will have to sign a statutory declaration, and the counselors will also have to sign a document indicating that they are in receipt of these cards, and that the cards are to go to these persons and nobody else. Additionally, we are going to expedite the numbers of persons who are on our list now who are awaiting home visits, because it is going to be difficult or challenging to do the home visits now. So we will, by executive order, indicate that the home visits will not be done at this time, and those persons will get their public assistance or their food cards for a 3-month period. And once this situation calms, we will do the home visits to ensure that they are in fact entitled. But in the meantime, they will get the cards, and they will get the public assistance, and they will get the disability grants for a period of 3 months initially. Thank you very much, Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Minister. That's a good point on which to make a comment, that it would be very disappointing indeed if, in the face of all that we are trying to do for the reasons that we have expressed, that we have at the end of the day to invoke law enforcement against the local smart man and the local smart woman. I want to say to you, ladies and gentlemen of Trinidad and Tobago, what we have just outlined is a stretch for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And the government will not hesitate to bring the full force of the law on any act of perceived and confirmed dishonesty. This is an honest attempt by the government to help as far as we're able to, and we expect to meet reciprocal honesty on the way up. I may draw your attention to the fact that when we had that flooding calamity at Greenvale, we made monies available to assist people who had been in dire straits. And unfortunately, we ended up having to see people being prosecuted for fraud and other acts of dishonesty. The door is open, not only here, but it's open elsewhere in areas of discomfort. If you are caught, the reason why those declarations are required to be signed is that they will form the basis of any required investigations And if in those investigations persons are found to have helped themselves illegally, then the full force of the law will be brought to bear on such dishonest persons. And let me say something else too. In case you had lost us a while ago, it is not Christmas Eve. There's no Santa Claus here. What in effect we have done is try to save our national situation in the face of the abrupt entry of the virus and the abrupt actions that are required to deal with the virus. We said to you earlier on, given the circumstances, what we had to do to preserve our economy is to ensure that there was significant liquidity in the system. Because under these circumstances, it is only cash that can move through the system in such a way as to allow us to preserve a structure of a semblance of an economy that could wait out this virus and still be there to provide activities and jobs whenever we come out of this situation. Failing that liquidity injection, we could be dealing with a collapse of the economy and the social order in Trinidad and Tobago. So all of those interventions you've heard, from the deferral of payments, the reduction in charges, the government grants, the loan avail, what we're trying to do is to make cash available to persons at all levels in the society. And once that cash is available, then we can all help to make ourselves as comfortable as is possible, given the circumstances. I would not be surprised at all if there are points of view that the money is not enough. But I could simply say, it will never be enough. What we have done is give you all that is available. And when you take what I just said to you early on, these decisions are taken against a background that we do not know how long this thing will last. And we're walking a tightrope between fighting off a virus that could kill us and trying to protect an economy that could collapse and a country could go into bankruptcy if things go pear-shaped. We are walking a tightrope in between that. So let us allow that to govern our reaction. This is a good time to take a few questions. We've been at it for a long time, so I hope that your questions would be short and to the point. So the floor is open for a few questions from the media.
I have a question to
Yes, sure.
Minister here. Each MC was to get 50 cards for the children. I did a rough calculation suggesting that the Trinidad's school population could be about 200,000 in all. I'm not sure what proportion of them get the school meals, but if you say it's a quarter, then that would be about, say, 50,000. So it seems to be quite a small drop in the bucket. And then the second issue was that if we have counted, sorry, let me just take this off a second. I can speak a little better. Right, the second issue.
That is why you're not supposed to wear a mask.
Inhale, okay.
See what you just did here? Because it affected yourself.
Okay, well, I don't know about that. We'll have a private discussion after this. Okay. But, right, the second leg of the question was that having councillors and MPs distributed, and if it's such a minute number, if it's only 50 people in the constituency where there might be a couple of thousand, you know, it kind of opens the issue, well, is there going to be, how do you choose this one or that one? You know, the issue of, say, favoritism.
Okay, let me say that what we tried to do is to ensure that we started the process. The easiest way to do that was, first of all, to give each MP 50 cards. That is 2,050 families. But it was the start of the process. What we have done since then, and even whilst we made up our minds to give each MP 50 cards, is to work with the Ministry of Education to get the database so that we know how many students we're dealing with now. So with regard to the counselors, they will have the rest of the cards then. You understanding? Okay, so the MPs would have distributed 2,050 households. The councillors will now distribute to the others. But we needed to have the data in place to match our data at social development with the data at the Ministry of Education. Because there are some students who are already in a household where they get a food card. If they're in such a household, that household will get the top up. So it may not be every student who is on school feeding who is already getting a food card, but there definitely will be some who need a food card. Okay? You're welcome.
Yes.
Yeah, the Arima Business, good afternoon, everyone. The Arima Business Association recently sent out a release, and one of the suggestions was, is there a possibility of reducing fuel prices for businesses that would have gone into receivership or...
Next question. That is not a real question.
Good afternoon, and also to members of your cabinet. Maybe Minister of Health could take this one. I'm asking how many ventilators we have in our healthcare system, if you deem it necessary, if you deem it sufficient, how many are in use? And we're also seeing internationally that doctors have to make the heart-wrenching decision as to when capacity is too much, as to who will get use of that ventilator or not. Are there protocols in place already to deal with that?
That's a very good question to ask. So, across the public healthcare system, there are 138 ventilators. Across the private sector, there are only 21. So the public sector, we have 138. We don't intend to touch that 138. What we are doing is putting our ventilator capacity in two locations, Couva and Augustus Long. So let me tell you how we are going to roll out this. In Couva, we currently have 12, of which only one is being used. 15 came into the country on the 19th of March, which is last week. 10 more are coming into the country on the 24th of March, which is tomorrow, through that same supplier. Now, I had given orders for this about a month and a half ago in preparing for COVID. And then we have another 50 coming in by about sometime around the middle-ish of April. In addition to that, we have foreign gifts of another 50 to 100. And all of these figures I'm calling for you are dedicated only for our COVID-19 response. So when I say our healthcare system is in a good place, it is. But I keep saying, if we don't behave in a certain way, all of this pre-planning, all of this resource allocation could amount to naught if as a country we don't behave. And I want the Chief Medical Officer to come up and talk to the country specifically about the dangers posed to babies, newborns, and young children in our nurseries, where if you have community spread, how these babies with their immature immune systems could suffer. Chief Medical Officer. So we don't have to use ventilators.
Okay. Yes, just to finish off the ventilator question first, to give you an idea of capacity. So when we did this, when there was a study done in China of about 44,000 patients, we keep hearing the figure 81% was mild, 15% moderate to severe, 5% was actually needing ventilatory support and ICU care. Of the 51 cases we have so far, only one person needs a ventilator, which is about 2% out of a small group of people. So even if we go to 5%, we have 1,000 cases. To give you an idea, we will need 50 ventilators for the country. We will expect that. So just to finish off that bit, I mean, beyond the in terms of the pediatric population, we're talking about anybody that is immunocompromised being at high risk. So children normally fit the bill of immunocompromised, persons over 65, persons with diabetes, hypertension, and the like. And just to give you, I mean, PAHO is doing an epidemiological model, which I said before could be a simplified model. It could be anywhere from a severe scenario to a scenario where we hardly have any cases. there were 19,000, I asked my portal unit to give me some figures. 19,852 people came to Trinidad via the airports in the last 14 days, which represents about 0.015% of the population. If you look at the way we have been testing and you check that rate, based on that figure, if we are actually going at the pickup rate that we're going now, we're looking at about 1,000 people if those people stay at home and just present with symptoms over the 14 days. If they don't, we can go to a completely different scenario. So we are looking at those 19,000, roughly 20,000 people. We have two choices. If they stay at home and do exactly what they're supposed to do, the scenario will be one that we can manage and we can cope. If the 19,000 people go out and they develop symptoms and mingle with the population, all of us will be infected and we will see the spike, which we're trying to avoid, happen overnight. And which has happened in Italy, has happened in China, is happening in the US. So what we're asking is those 20,000 people, stay at home. If you have contacts, stay at home. So the message is stay at home, we will keep the curve flat, and we will get through this.
Let me just say something.
Yeah.
Finish?
No, Minister just wanted me to add, of course, the babies, for some reason, with other viruses, children tend to be greatly affected. For some reason, for people less than a year, there seems to be some sparing. There's some research that suggests some sparing. However, if the children are infected, again, they take it back home to the high-risk populations. When children can't do social distancing. They can't do it well. Children, any small child cannot social distance. They will come, babies, of course they can't. So they will be in close contact with anybody else. So that is a group of population that can lead to rapid spread if we have them mingling. So that is my concern in particular with that group of the population. Sure, we are using the international protocols for ventilation use. All our ICU practitioners are well trained and equipped to do so.
Let me just, as the conversation gathers momentum, let me just say something. When I say we are all in this together, it simply means that we all have to behave according to the request. As I speak to you now, I've been and I continue to be a troubled parent. My daughter is in Ground Zero, New York right now. And even if she wants to come home, she cannot come home because we have closed this border for the reasons given. My niece came in from Jamaica almost 14 days ago and has been in total self-quarantine for the last 12 or 13 days. My nephew came in from somewhere in the United States. He went into quarantine. Both of them scared as to what might happen to their mother, who is in the age that is vulnerable. But we have to be responsible. There's no window of exemption because nobody is going to be given a pass because of who you are, where you come from, or who needs to pull a string. It's either we have the borders closed, we have the doors closed, or we have it half open. And that is why those exhortations to do something here for an exemption, open a door here to pass some beer through a window, these are all unnecessaries. We either going to do it and get the result the doctor said we can get, that the Minister of Health is asking for, or we're not going to do it and get the other result. I look at what is happening outside. I've been looking at it for the last 2 months, and frankly, if we reach the stage where all those ventilators are required, it would mean that we have lost this battle.
I just wanted to find out, the two recent cases that you mentioned, you said one came from the population of the cruise.
Not the two recent, before that. The two recent cases were not linked to that vessel. The last two cases, which would have been case 10 and case 11. I am taking it away from the big group, which is 50. Sorry,
So
yeah.
so it remains that 40 of the 68
Are positive.
were positive.
Yeah. The other positive that I spoke about was also belonging to the vessel. They came into Trinidad a few days prior by aircraft, 2 persons. They were both taken straight from our Port Health unit under strict quarantine to the Cora facility. One of them later developed symptoms, was tested, and turned out to be positive. That person would have belonged to the initial 9 one of the initial 9 that was tested positive.
So all the persons who tested positive so far have been at Cora or Cuba?
That's right, yeah. Aside from yes, they are at Cora or Cuba at this point.
All the persons tested so far. What about the Balandra group?
No, all the persons that have tested positive are now at Cora or Cuba. That's correct, yeah.
Right, so that those were the only 2 facilities that they went to, Cora and Cuba.
No, the other, of the initial 68 that gone to, apart from those, yes, that's correct, yeah. Apart from the group that went to Balandra.
Very first patient who was, I think, from Switzerland, 52 years old, who we said had been improving.
Sure.
Could we get like an update on him? And then also the patient number 2, who was really quite badly hit.
So, I mean, without giving out too much detail, the patient has been very well since last week. The WHO guideline for discharging someone from a medical institution after having COVID-19, you have to be 7 days without any symptoms. We do 2 tests thereafter. So we do 1 test at day 7 of symptom-free. We do 1 24 hours after that. If you get 2 negatives in a row, 24 hours apart, after having 7 days of no symptoms, we can discharge you home. So we are going to test the first case very soon for his hopefully getting his first negative. If we get the second one, we can discharge him home.
Yes, Uvashri.
Mr. Prime Minister, with regards to the 19,852 persons who would have come through the port as reported by the CMO, but this question goes to you. Given the type of activity that we've been seeing over the past couple of days in terms of persons being responsible, is there any way, I know it's a lot, but is there any way that these persons could be policed, or we could ensure that they are sticking to their 14 days, please?
The policing that you're calling for, there's some element of persuasion taking place, but it is not logistically feasible to police every household and every individual. Even if you say that is what you're going to do, you know it's not going to be done. It's not logistically feasible, because you could be policing it by knocking on the door to make sure that they're there, to make sure that they say they're going to be there, and then the police goes away, and what happens? If they are irresponsible, as soon as the officer leaves the compound, they go and do what they want. This is a problem, I kept saying from the beginning. This is a problem that would rise or fall on the behavior of individuals. It is not feasible to police to that level effectively, especially within the time frame that we're looking at. Because even if we set out to police now, logistically we won't get very far. What we're aiming to do is not get to a point where the accelerated curve results in an infection level that requires a response that overwhelms the health system. That's what it is. That's what we're dealing with. Out there, like for example, with the people in the church, people in the schools who are, let us hope that those are outliers. The majority of people are cooperating, that is good. Those who are not cooperating, we are seeking to persuade them to cooperate, to bring it. That is what is logistically feasible. Right? And those who want to stand on their rights, because I heard a conversation about rights, and tell you that they must do that so that they could damage the whole country, well, that is where law enforcement will come in. So there's an element of law enforcement, but I hope that would be against a very, very tiny minority who is standing on their rights. And for those who are prepared to stand on their rights in the face of this potential, because let me tell you all something, all that has happened so far to us, my fear is what's going to happen next week and the week after and the week after. There's a story being told about a frog in Tobago and the bus coming from Mariah. The frog was crossing the road first and had a right to cross the road. And the bus was coming and the bus kept coming. And the frog was saying, I was here first. And the bus passed, and there was no frog. Okay? Do you remember that story?
Consequence. for not quarantining if you are told to quarantine?
Yes, the minister can answer that.
Yes, so under the Quarantine Act, Section 3B sets up what is called the Quarantine Authority. The Quarantine Authority is a one-man authority, and that one man is the Chief Medical Officer. And he has all the rights and privileges to find people under the Quarantine Act, and the Minister of National Security could take it further.
Self-isolation. If you're told, I'm trying to get the chain of people.
Let me try and assist you. One of the points the CMO has been making repeatedly, and he's asked for the assistance of national security, and he has it as best as we can provide it. You come into the country, everyone is required to self-quarantine for 14 days. All right? Self-quarantine of your own volition. If the CMO asks anyone under the act that the Minister of Health has just said that he's quarantining them, then we will enforce it. We have the option, like we did with those people we put in Balandra, to quarantine persons. Of course, we didn't want to reach that stage. If, in addition to what the Prime Minister has said in response to Urvashi's question, we have a committee that is set up. The police and the Defence Force are working with the CMO, and on his instructions, he is providing a list of persons that they would want us to patrol. But it is exactly as the Prime Minister, Honourable Prime Minister, has said. We are performing that duty, but you're not going to be outside 24/7. So it comes down to personal responsibility. The self-quarantine is different to a state quarantine. Even with the state quarantine, there are two tiers. The CMO can take someone and physically have them put into quarantine, as we did with those persons who came off the cruise, and we took them directly to Balandra, straight off of the aircraft, seamless, without any issue whatsoever. Or he can say, I'm quarantining you to stay in your home, and then we will do what needs to happen in those circumstances.
Yeah, but what I'm worried about is when people are quarantined in their home, and there are other members
and that's the point I was actually trying to hint to the CMO to make that point. We don't want that to happen. So, for example, the point that the Prime Minister was making with the front of the Express, not to belabor it, in our discussion this morning, I immediately said, so the person who's returned shares that intimate moment with someone else. She may self-quarantine at home. He may now go out into public. So that is what we're saying. With self-quarantining, when you return, it means isolate yourself away from the rest of your family. But if the family takes a decision to be amongst each other, then the family has to quarantine, the whole family, the whole household.
But again, let us be realistic. There are very many households in this country, by the nature of their physical accommodation space and the population within that confined space, that makes it very difficult to properly, but that is a fact. And we can only get away from that if there isn't a rolling infection taking place in the community. If there's an infection taking place in the community across the board and it gets into that kind of development, we will find out when it begins to manifest itself. But not everybody in Trinidad and Tobago has a spare room that you could use as an in-house. But the most we can do is to ask you to be alert to your personal hygiene in every circumstance, and also try to see to what extent you could stay away from persons who are expressing symptoms, or try to keep the distance that is asked for if it is as far as you are able to. That is why these kinds of things are so challenging, and we cannot guarantee the outcome. I would be fooling you if I would tell you here that we have something in place that will ensure that every citizen stays 6 feet from another citizen, and therefore we can't transmit. It is because we know that we can transmit why all the things that we have done are being done and have been done. And that is why we are expecting along the way that there will be reports of confirmations, and that those reports will require certain attention. Hopefully, the effects will be mild, but if they're not mild and they require further attention, then we will be able to provide that attention. That's what the preparation is all about. This is a rolling number of a situation that is evolving on a daily basis. The curves that we have seen over the weeks and the last month and a half show that as we go towards where we are going now, It's either we're going to climb a very steep curve or we're going to climb a gentle curve, and we are aiming for that gentle curve, which is allow the infections to come to us, do things so that it comes to us in such a way that as it comes, we can cope. If it comes because of a huge increase in the infection rate and a concentration of infection, then all the plans that we would have laid in place may not be able to cope with it. I trust that explains what we're trying to do. Yes.
Julian News from Newsday. A couple of questions. Minister Dial Singh, you mentioned nurseries. What is the policy with private nurseries? Are they allowed to continue to operate?
Look, we have come up with these orders as a rolling thing. As the Prime Minister said in one of his first press conferences, and I want to use his exact words, we should not have to be beating people over your head with a bat to tell you to do the right thing. Do we really need to have a public health order to tell people who own nurseries, oh gosh, the lives of those babies are in your hands? Do we really need to do that via policy? Or should common sense prevail? I think common sense should prevail, whether it's a nursery, a Montessori school, or preschool. You are handling children with immature immune systems, as the Chief Medical Officer just said. If COVID runs through a nursery with 6-month-old babies, and then the babies go home, and as the Chief Medical Officer said, you can't have social distancing from your baby. You must breastfeed your baby, you must bathe your baby, then the parent becomes infected. Then the grandmother becomes infected. So it should not come down to a law. It should come down to our collective sense of personal responsibility. And that's what the Honorable Prime Minister keeps saying. I hope that answers your question.
Mr. Prime Minister, regarding the citizens that are stranded in Margarita, have you yourself or the Minister of National Security reached out to your counterparts in Venezuela to make an exemption to get these people home?
I thought the Prime Minister had made it abundantly clear at the outset, and I tried to add some clarity. Our borders are closed. That's the first point. We're not granting exemptions. What I can tell you is the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs and our officers who are based at our Caracas embassy have been in touch with the persons who are in Margarita and are doing all they can working with the Venezuelan authorities to ensure their safety and this type of thing. We are in very difficult circumstances globally. You all would recall at the outset of this, when it took off in China, one of the issues we had was 120 citizens of Trinidad and Tobago who were in China. Again, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, through our embassy in China, did what they had to do, and that is what is applying to these persons in Margarita. We have not made any request for any repatriation because we don't want this spread. Our borders are closed.
Yes. Well, as you said, the borders are closed. I'm just saying, what advice or what support could the government still provide to persons who are in these countries and don't have the financial wherewithal to remain until April 30th?
You would follow the normal, my understanding is we follow the normal foreign affairs protocols. Our embassies in touch with them, in particular from Caracas, and they will do the best that they can. What the officer from the embassy down there has informed us is he's doing the best he can. He's speaking to, for example, some of the hotels where they're staying at, and there are certain protocols that would apply where they are in touch with the local authorities there for help and assistance.
Gentleman back at the white tie.
Jesse from CNC3, Ms. Robinson Regis. Will any provisions be made to accommodate non-nationals such as Venezuelans with regard to some of these social programs at this point in time?
At this time, the social programs are for citizens and permanent residents. Could I just indicate in answer to Sean's question, just to clarify it a little further, on the school feeding program, we have 79,045 children. of those children, some of the parents already get a food card. Now, even if we gave all our counselors food cards to give out, that would be 139 counselors, and that would mean each counselor would get in the order of 500, just over 500 food cards to give out. However, by comparing our database with the Ministry of Education's database of children who are on school feeding, we'll be able to tell whether some of those children who get school feeding already have belong to a family that gets a food card. And that will eliminate the ones who already get a food card would not be included in this number that we're now giving out. So we're in the process of doing that.
I asked Prime Minister permission. Jesse, the question you asked Minister Regis triggered something in my mind, and I asked the Prime Minister permission. On the issue of testing, testing is available to every living soul in Trinidad and Tobago, whether you are a citizen, a Venezuelan, illegal immigrant, anybody. So I want to make that point abundantly clear that anybody who feels they have been exposed to COVID, anybody who feels that they fit the profile, travel history, you have a Venezuelan maid, gardener, and you in a house that has a confirmed case, a secondary case, any living soul in Trinidad and Tobago should feel free, as long as you fit the criteria, to get tested for COVID. I want to make that point abundantly clear.
Prime Minister, probably you could answer this question. Has government basically put a cap on the number of people who will be entitled or will be the recipient of the salary relief grant? Is there a number that you all have worked on?
Minister of Finance, could you answer that, please?
What the members of the committee who were tasked to consult with the business community have told us is that within the sectors who would be directly impacted, in the first instance, you're looking at perhaps about 60,000 persons. And then we figure there'll be another 20,000 or so. So our calculations are based on about 80,000 persons over a 3-month period. And then we've added in a little extra for unknowns, because this is a very fluid situation. So we're looking at about 80, more or less, maybe a little more, over a 3-month period, receiving 80,000, receiving 1,500. But that is assuming that everybody is completely affected. So that's a very fluid situation, and we'll see as the numbers come in and people make applications and so on.
So with those persons who qualify for the relief grant, would they too be able to qualify for the temporary food cards?
I can't answer that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it would depend on, in those circumstances, it would be done individually.
Yeah.
Remember, I just want to repeat the food card, because I think when people hear food card, they hear free for all. But it is not a free for all. We have clients who already receive a food card, who have a food card in hand. Those persons will get a top-up on their food card for 3 months. We have a second situation where we will be giving temporary food cards to the families of children who currently receive school feeding. But it will be not all the families, but those who are not now receiving a food card. There will also be those persons who have a reduced income or who have been terminated or who have been retrenched. They may be eligible for a temporary food card. So is that clearer? Okay.
I want to the Prime Minister. Minister Mbe, there already. The salary relief grant, that will only be for persons who pay NIS, because there are many people who, like housekeepers, people working in bars and so on, who would lose their salaries but may not be on the NIS database?
That's a very good question. We have to start with the information that we have at this point in time. That is why I said we added in a little more as we get more information about the system. The NIB has a database of everybody in the PAYE system who is registered for NIS, not self-employed or not persons who are not in the NIS system. So that's why if you take 80,000 by $1,500 a month for 3 months, you get $360 million. But we have put an allocation of $400 million because of the unknowns that will come to the fore as we go along. So we're starting with the people where we have information on. You would have their name, address, where they work, their ID card number. NIB has all of that. And then the other cases will have to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis as it evolves, okay?
Let me just add a little proviso to that. We're using the institutional arrangement of the NIB, but we know that there will be people who will not be on the NIB list. And one of the reasons for that would be persons who would not have been complying. And what this situation will do is those persons who are not on the list and were employed and are now not covered, who are identified on the NIB list, that says something for and about the employer. But such persons can approach the Ministry of Social Development for that social development assistance. But but that action will identify persons for whom they should have been an NIB record. And maybe they should be. They're supposed to be.
Just let me intervene here. When I was doing the calculations in terms of social development support, we also put some extra there for that category of persons.
Could I just also say that we have alerted ourselves to that possibility in social development. So when we have told, we are going to indicate to the self-employed and those others who may be in that category that when they go to the Ministry of Labor to register, they will be captured there.
Let me just add something quickly, please, because the point about Venezuelans is important. Could I ask the 3 print media, Express, Guardian, Newsday, I think you have a Spanish language section, correct? Could you please, as a public service message, put into that section that Venezuelans can feel free once they meet the criteria to get tested for COVID. This will help us stop community spread. Thank you very much.
In terms of the illegal
migrants, I think we're coming close to the end of this, right? So, Vashi, you get one more question, really get one more, and then we'll end there. Yes, sir, Vashi.
I was going to ask if that will now open up the door to illegal immigrants.
No, it wouldn't. Let me tell you what it's going to do. The virus is no respecter of your landed immigrant status. If there are Venezuelans here, or anybody for that matter, and such persons' bodies are carrying the virus, they are as detrimental to us as a person born in St. James or Mason Hall. So if we are going to protect the population of Trinidad and Tobago, we've got to protect them from all persons who may be carrying that virus. And that is why in this country and other countries, you would find persons are going to be looked at regardless of your status once you're present and available to carry the virus. Yes, Ria, I think. Okay. As I said early on, from day one, we have been monitoring this situation on an hourly basis, on a daily basis. We have taken certain actions, and we will not hesitate, and we expect to take firm action where and when firm action is required. So far, we have not been required to do certain things. For example, the places in the United States now where you are required to stay at home in-house. There are some countries that have been doing this, but remember, if we do that, there are consequences. And the question, what we've been trying to do is to fight the virus while not destroying our ability to maintain some semblance of order and existence. If we instruct to stay at home now, just remember, right now, people are still going to work. We are still producing some things. We are still having an element of an economy going on. In order to stay at home for 14 days will have far-reaching consequences. What we have been able to do so far is to protect ourselves from the entry of the virus for a while and from the spread for a while. And that allows us the window to not go to a shutdown. But as we monitor the infection rate, the infection level, we are aiming to, and I'm confident that we will be able to intervene at an appropriate time once the circumstances change to give us that demand to do that. So that is where this daily and hourly monitoring is about. We're not going to do something because it's happening elsewhere. We have been measuring ourselves in this, and the only thing that we are nervous about is a lack of cooperation among the population. That cooperation is worth everything, because with the cooperation, we are able to do a bit more. For example, we've closed all our beaches. This morning, there was a big argument in Mississippi as to whether or not the beaches should be closed. We didn't wait to close our beaches. We closed Chagaramas, we closed Macarip, we closed 9 or 10 beaches in Tobago. Of course, there are people who are saying, I want to go to the beach because I have free time. We got to slap down those people because they are threatening. I don't mean literally. What that attitude is doing is threatening the very carefully laid plan. I want to end on the note that our health professionals have been preparing, and are doing a wonderful job to give us a chance to walk this curve without it being too steep. And the only thing that could change it for us is our own behavior at the personal level. So let me just say one thing finally. Trinidad and Tobago, in our constitution, we acknowledge we are a nation under God. Next week, we were supposed to be celebrating Baptist Liberation Day 2 Mondays from now. I think next week. Next Monday 31st. And we had a number of functions planned as we normally would. We have had to cancel all of those because of the circumstances. And I have been, before this virus started, to be an integral part of our daily lives, I, as Prime Minister, I have been meeting with the leadership of all our religious bodies. Because as you know, one of the responsibilities in the office of the Prime Minister is for ecclesiastical affairs. I wear no surplice, but I represent the government in dealing with our religious bodies. And we have been having those meetings, and so far I would have met with the Anglicans, the Catholics, the Seventh-day Adventists, Pentecost, evangelicals, and we were having some very good interaction between church and state. And then this thing came about. But all along, one of the requests that have been made is that one of these days we should have a day of prayer. That's what one of the first requests was made by these people that we were meeting with. And I think this is as good a time as any. And on Sunday, the 27th of March, Sunday, 29th of March, which is next Sunday, I will take Sunday coming. Today is Monday, so it's Sunday coming. I will I have already given the instructions to my staff to reach out to the leadership of the various religious bodies to invite one of their leaders from each grouping to join me and my wife in the chapel at the Prime Minister's residence and to have a day of prayer there, a church service there, which would be streamed and be live, where we can be joined by members of the national community who cannot and will not be able to go and gather in churches and mosques and mandirs and wherever we worship. But on that day, let that be our day of prayer. So you can pray wherever you are and you can join this development. And as we do that, we will ask for God's blessing in a very difficult situation and do so with our brothers and sisters for one purpose, asking for this very difficult and threatening circumstance to pass us by. I have been in touch with my colleague in Barbados, and I have been in communication with the Minister of National Security asking for an exemption when the time comes. We have some of our children in Barbados and Jamaica, and we have some Barbadians in Trinidad and Tobago. And in the system of closing the border, we have been in communication with the principals of the campuses, and in the next few days, we will make arrangement and take steps to bring our children home, those who would like to come home, so that they will be with family during this period. So that's being organized now. It is not an opening of the closed border. It is part of our preparation to batten down our hatches. And those children who are in Jamaica and Barbados, we are going to take steps to bring them home in the next few days. We're sorting out the numbers now, and we will cooperate. We are cooperating with our CARICOM neighbors to get that done. Thank you all very much, and we continue to rely on you all to accurately report and responsibly tell the population that we are all in this together. Thank you.